in everything that we do and with every step we make, if you do it right, the reason that you keep moving forward is because you're not moving forward alone. And if you never forget who it is that you are fighting for, you'll never stop fighting.
It's such an honor to sit with both of you this evening. History being made, not just for the state of Maryland, not just for Black folks. History is being made, period. The history books will now say that Maryland has its first Black first couple leading the state, Wes Moore and Don Moore, Governor-elect, soon to be Governor of the state of Maryland, and First Lady, well, you First Lady of the household of Moore.
Yeah, that's it. She's had that title already.
Yeah. And then you will be First Lady of the state of Maryland. There is a heavy weight with being a first. Talk to me about that.
Thank you, April. Oh my goodness, it's so good to be with you. It is such an honor and a privilege to be in this position. The election of my husband was absolutely historic, and Marylanders spoke out about the things that were important to him. He ran on a leave no one behind agenda. And as I always said on the trail, my husband is a promise keeper. And there's no doubt that Wes, as a leader, as an empathetic leader, is ready for the moment. And while history is absolutely being made, as he always says, it's not the assignment. People wanted change, and they wanted to feel a part of such an important process, and that's only great for Maryland. So I'm very excited about this moment, and thankful to the voters of Maryland for selecting my husband and his running mate to be the next leaders of this state.
It's not just about change, it's hope. On the campaign trail, I never saw down faces, I saw smiles, energy. Even when your voice wavered, you were still moving. And I see that in people in moments of despair and distress and dis-ease. What is the dis-ease that you're trying to bridge in these next few years?
I think the thing that we saw all throughout the campaign trail over these past years is there is a feeling of uncertainty that people have. There is the lack of stability, the lack of an understanding about what these next days and months and years are going to bring, because it just feels like for a lot of people, the only stability is instability that they continue to feel inside of their lives. And I think that what they were looking for is a clear vision and a path as to what it is that we were looking for and what it was looking to do. Concrete things, right? So when we said at the beginning of the campaign trail, this is about economics, right? It's about work, wages, and wealth. How are you creating pathways to all three of those things for all Marylanders and not just some? And how are we making an argument and showing people that the only way for this state to win is if we all win? Yes. If we're having a unified conversation and not a conversation where, you know, we're accepting these false choices that we continue to be given about who can succeed and who can't. In order for this group to win, it means this group must lose. These are false choices that have been fed to us by people who continue to win.
I want to put a pin in the economics because that is something that is so large. It has loomed large for decades, even hundreds of years, for certain communities in this nation. But I want to go to something, hope and change. In this moment for the nation is inundated with investigations. The Democratic Party was very hopeful at the beginning of this 118th Congress, and that's changed. Your inauguration will be the bright spot for Democrats. There's a heavy weight on you right now as everyone is like, oh, woe is me in this moment. Do you feel that? Because you are actually the bright spot. You were the bright spot in the midterm election, and now you're going to be the governor of the state of Maryland, the first Black governor of the state of Maryland, the third Black elected governor in this nation. And just like Georgia, that song, we had Georgia on our mind for about a year. but we also sang "Oh Maryland," right?
Yes.
And that's about you. So is there a weight on you in the midst of all of this quagmire, these albatrosses that are around every party's neck? Is there a weight on you right now?
I think the optimism wasn't about me. I think the optimism was about us, about the fact that I think Maryland is ready to move in a different space and is ready to shed this weight that the politics of negativity and divisiveness has continued to allow all of us to try to bear. And I think about it where, I'm very humbled that the history, there was some other history that was made on election night, and that history was we received more individual votes than anybody who's ever run for the office of governor in the history of the state of Maryland, right? Ever. We ended up winning by the largest margin in the state of Maryland in 40 years in a governor's race. And the thing that's really inspiring for me on that is that's not just because black folks vote for us. It's not just because Democrats vote for us, because the truth is, you don't get to the numbers we got to with one group. We ended up winning amongst veterans and veteran households, which Democrats never do. We ended up winning for people who said that crime was the number one issue and people that said that economics was the number one issue. We won in Western Maryland, we won the Eastern Shore, 16 of the 24 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland, we got the highest vote total ever of a Democratic candidate. And the thing that's really inspiring to me and to us in this moment is that there is a unified, concerted belief that if we stand divided, we can't win. But if we stand united, we can't lose. That this is going to be Maryland's time. But it means we've got to be able to bring about a leave no one behind agenda, something I learned when I was in the military, 17 years old, leave no one behind. If we can take that type of philosophy and take that idea, that's the thing I think Marylanders rallied around. And where, I say that, they voted for us in these record numbers not because they wanted me to make history. They voted in those record numbers because they knew that we were the ones speaking to their issues.
And I think throughout the campaign, and similar to how Wes is setting up government now, and with the inauguration, we set out to make this the most inclusive inauguration that this state has ever seen. And that is from the vendors that we're working with, from, of course, everyone who is invited to attend. We have been intentional about that. And we were intentional on the campaign. Wes showed up everywhere.
Yeah, he did.
He went to every part of the state. And the interesting thing is that when he showed up, he was showed love. He gave a speech recently at Morgan's graduation, and he said, I don't let my haters fuel me. I let the people who love me fuel me. And I think he saw that when he went, and so he just kept going and kept showing up. And Marylanders knew this is the kind of leader we want, because he's going to show up for us when it counts.
So First Lady Moore, when the leader is in office, typically the wife, the First Lady, supports her husband and the community with projects and with service. And when women support their husbands, or when they are involved in politics, it's about love and uplift of a community. What are some of your projects that you want to focus in these years in the governor's house?
Thank you. Well, I will say this. I am very focused on getting to January 18th. We have so many wonderful things going on, from a day of service to a faith concert to his swearing in to the People's Gala. And so that obviously in itself is a big focus of mine. We are also moving to a new home.
Yes.
And we have young children. And so I will certainly be focused on transitioning our family. And anyone who has moved a house knows it's a lot of work to get that done. But I fully support, obviously, the Leave No One Behind agenda. And when I select the things that I want to work on in relationship and in partnership with Marylanders, Of course, I care about many things, the arts, food deserts, workforce development, but I want to have the opportunity as the First Lady to listen and learn what's most important to Marylanders. I have some good ideas, but we are here to serve. And so I'll take my time to make that decision, but I'm definitely looking forward to it.
And my last question to you, he's magnificent. Yeah, I've known him for a while. Did you ever imagine when you were dating this young man that he would take you on this journey, I mean, around the world, and then to the governor's house and maybe beyond?
You know, I don't know what I really imagined, I'll be honest with you. But I will tell you this, when we got married, we wrote our own vows. And he said to me, I promise to keep this fun and exciting. And he never lied.
All right. Well, I'm sure it's going to be fun and exciting because there is such effervescence with both of you. And to see you to continue to churn it out and keep a smile and keep hope, that was a lot. And you are not a politician, and now you are. That was a lot, because the test of a politician is the stamina during a campaign. And both of you were smiling because you saw what the end could be.
And I got to tell you, it's not just that I couldn't have done this without her in practical terms, because if she said, we ain't doing this, we wouldn't have done it, right? So that's ultimate veto power. But I couldn't have done it without her. Every single day, and you know, and there's something that I'll never forget with her is that, you know, all during ups and downs and all the difficulty, you know, she was always there. And I remember we started this thing at 1%, literally polling at 1%. You know, I laugh, say, I'm not voting was polling higher than where I was polling at. And I don't know where things started changing. We started ticking up. We started ticking up. We started ticking up, and all the other people started either staying flat or ticking down, ticking down, ticking down. And then the silliness of politics began, right? Just the negativity and the lies and all this kind of stuff that comes into it. And I remember one day on one of these times, I'm like, why in the world? You're thinking to yourself, why do we put ourselves even through this foolishness? And we're in our room, and she puts her hands on my face, and she says, they're doing this because you're going to win. Keep going. I couldn't have done this without her. And I know with every single journey, with every single step, not only am I loving the way that the state is just completely falling in love with their new First Lady, it's actually really beautiful to watch. It just serves as an important reminder that in everything that we do and with every step we make, if you do it right, the reason that you keep moving forward is because you're not moving forward alone. And if you never forget who it is that you are fighting for, you'll never stop fighting. And that's why we're doing the work.
Madam First Lady, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Now I'm going to take the governor-elect by himself. You have him. Governor Wes Moore. Look at you smile.
It's, well, you know the thing, it's so humbling to think about that, especially when you consider not just the journey of this campaign, it's the journey of this state.
Yes.
It's the fact that, you know, I think about Government House, the place where we're going to be moving to. Since 1870, every governor of Maryland and their families have lived in Government House. And just a few weeks back, the current governor, Governor Hogan, and the First Lady gave myself and my family a tour of Government House. And I remember going back and talking to Dawn later on that night and saying, we have an 11-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. And watching these two little black children running around the house, picking out which room was going to be theirs. This journey has been so improbable, but I think that the thing that really is just so heartening about the whole thing is that all the people who put in the work to make this journey real. So it's like, you know, when people, you know, the expression of I can see higher because I stand on the shoulders there is no doubt that I can see higher. I can now see from this perch because there's a whole lot of shoulders who are sitting there and keeping my feet firm.
As you talk about keeping your feet firm, we cannot omit what you went through during the campaigning. You were against someone who was of a total different ideology, someone who had the support of Donald Trump. This nation is now divided. It's not just the Republican Party in fractures, but Republican against Democrat. How do you plan to unite this state that is a microcosm of the larger community, the largeness of the country that's trying to find its way, that's still going through growing pains politically?
You know, I plan on really attacking that by attacking it head on. You aren't going to lecture me on patriotism.
82nd Airborne.
That's it. You know, my definition of patriotism was when I left my family and I deployed to Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne Division and risked my life for this country. And you're not going to lecture me on that. You're not going to lecture me on patriotism when I know I was raised by patriots, because I was raised by teachers. I was raised by ministers. Right? My family is operating engineers. My family are people who built this country with their hands. You're not going to lecture me on patriotism. And I think it becomes incredibly important that we do not allow an individual or a party to bastardize this term. If you talk about people who love this country, how about the people who have sacrificed and bled to make this country better, knowing how much work the country had to do to get better, particularly because some of its most divisive and oppressive impacts were impacting you, right? That's patriotism. Patriotism is not working to destroy democracy. Patriotism is not saying that you love the country, but you hate half of the people in it. So this is something that, you know, we took a very aggressive approach to it on the campaign trail. And I think part of the reason that we ended up having such a resounding victory is if you make the argument, you can win the argument, but you gotta make the argument. And you cannot allow that just to be subsided.
Patriotism is one of the sticking points of the divide between Republicans and Democrats. It's one. I'm going back to the economy. Yes. That's a big piece. And I think about a conversation I had with former Virginia Governor Doug Wilder. Former Virginia Governor Doug Wilder, black man. How about that? You
First.
are in, yes,
First.
You are now in that very small fraternity, right? He said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said something to the effect that when people are hurting economically, that's when racism begins to bubble to the surface. When people feel like someone's taking from them when they're already struggling. Let's put a face on that in the state of Maryland. Black and white, Jew, Gentile, Protestant, and Catholic. There's so many different groups that are feeling the pinch. Maryland has great highs economically and great lows. Where do we bridge that gap? How do we bridge that gap?
I think it becomes really important that we also are honest with people about what the data is showing on this. You know, part of the reason that we are unapologetic about saying things like Maryland is going to close the racial wealth gap. And people say, you know, you should be careful about talking about that as a black candidate, that you're going to seem like you're, you know, talking about zero-sum politics. And I said, no, the current system is zero-sum politics. Because the truth is Maryland has an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap. But the reason why I talk about that on the campaign trail is not just because I'm speaking to African Americans. You know, the racial wealth gap in this country has cost this country $16 trillion in GDP over the past 2 decades. That's not GDP of a group. That's GDP. Lost product, lost production, because of a racial wealth gap that we're not willing to confront. And so it is all about economics. I think the thing we want people to understand is if you truly want to have sustainable economic mobility, you've got to make sure that the sustainable economic mobility is shared. Because if you have a consistent and a permanent underclass, you're never going to be able to have the kind of economic growth that you're hoping for. If you want to help yourself, help others. And so when we talk about economic growth, I'm not saying it to be selfless. I'm saying it because if you really want to have economic growth, be selfish and talk about what does it mean to actually share that pie and grow yourself into greater prosperity.
It's been such a wonderful time to spend with you on the eve of your governorship. I've known you for a bit.
Right.
And I'm proud of you as a person. As a Black person, I'm over the moon. My humanity sees this. In 2023, I see this. But as a journalist, I'm going to be journaling the history. Trust that, Governor Wes Moore. But with that said, I can't help but think of some of the heroes, superheroes in the state, like former Congressman Elijah Cummings, late Congressman Elijah Cummings.
Oh my God.
And we're talking about the economics of it all. And I think about when he was congressperson, and he said that a lot of corporations could not come or would not come to Baltimore because they felt that the field was unhireable. You have dealt with poverty, you have dealt with issues of economics. How will you change that dynamic?
I want people to understand how incredibly asset rich this place is. The challenge is we're asset rich and we're strategy poor. Because if you look at the assets of the state of Maryland, the assets in Baltimore, we have some of the best assets around. We're literally talking about a place in a city, just the city, that has 2 of the top HBCUs in America. We've got the Port of Baltimore, one of the most productive ports. We've got Johns Hopkins University and other amazing institutions, 2-year colleges, and the most remarkable asset is the people. That's Baltimore. And it's also really important that the state understands that you cannot have a thriving Maryland if you do not have a thriving Baltimore. It is the state's largest city.
Yeah.
And so our ability to be able to support the city, our ability to be able to have a thriving Baltimore is only going to mean that the state of Maryland is going to grow. And I tell people, I don't say that because I'm emotional about it. I say that because I'm good at math. You know, if you look at what's happened over in Detroit over the past 12 years, Detroit's growth has been one of the key reasons that you've had Michigan growth. If you look at Atlanta over the past 30 years, Atlanta went from being a small, commuter town to now rivaling Hollywood in terms of film productions. Do you know the main beneficiary of that has been Georgia? So we have to have a thriving Baltimore if you're going to have a thriving Maryland.
And lastly, there are so many parallels between you and former President Barack Obama. The only thing is, you are now a politician. And he was a politician moving into the White House, but he also used a historic Bible for his inauguration, Dr. King's Bible. But in my hand, I am blessed and honored to have the Bible that you were using when you give the oath as governor of the state of Maryland. It's your grandfather's Bible. Tell me about this Bible.
So my grandfather was actually the first one on my mom's side of the family born in this country. And his father, my great-grandfather, was a minister, and he was a vocal minister. He was one of these ministers that didn't just teach the word of God, but reminded people on earth they need to live a certain way. And eventually he started getting threats, and it was the Ku Klux Klan that ran them out, where in the middle of the night, he picked up his family to include his toddler son, my grandfather, and they left this country. They went back to Jamaica. And much of my family said that they would never come back to this country. But my grandfather did, because my grandfather, in all of his humility, he said, this country will be incomplete without me. So he came back, he went to an HBCU, and he became a minister just like his father, except he became the first black minister in the history of the Dutch Reformed Church. So my grandfather was actually the first trailblazer in our family. the reason why this Bible means so much to me, and you can see, I mean, this thing is held together by tape.
Held together by tape and notes inside.
Notes.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, old sermons.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I always say this Bible is a workbook. This is a workbook. It has notes in the margin. It has comments. It has questions. He literally has questions about he wonders what X means or what Y means. And I love this Bible. And I'm so proud that, this is a Bible that I not only use, but I'll get sworn in on this Bible. And the reason it's so powerful to me is because this allows me a gauge into his mind. It allows me to maintain a level of closeness to someone who was one of my heroes and still is, and allows me to understand in his own words what I'm supposed to take away from this. And I actually think about in the book of Joshua, which by the way happens to be one of his middle name, how Moses passed the baton when Moses transitioned, how essentially he passed the baton to Joshua. And while Moses led the people for 40 years through the desert, and then when he got his glory and the sea parted, he died. And then it was Joshua's point. And there's a point he writes in the Bible, and it was a sermon he gave where he said, how Moses must have felt a certain type of way about that. Because he's like, I did all the work. I led my people through heat and cold and storms. And when comes time for my glory, you tell me to come home because Joshua's going to take him the rest of the way. And he would tell this sermon about how he knows at that moment that was God telling Moses, it's because you've done your job already.
Well done, my good and faithful
well
servant.
Well done, my good and faithful servant. Now it's Joshua's turn to do his. And that's the mentality that I'm taking into this next journey.
One of the reasons why I adore you so much is because you have a story for everything. You bring humanity into the moment. It's about people, it's about real life. And for that, I thank you for this moment that we have. And I look forward to interviewing you and writing the history of your rise as governor of the state of Maryland, the first Black governor of the state of Maryland, and also the pride of the Democratic Party in this moment when they're trying to find their footing yet again. Thank you, Wes Moore.
God bless you, my friend. I adore you.
I adore you. Thank you.